Okay, I want to go over some of the techniques that I use to tie the stimmies that I tie. The first thing I do when I start my thread is you want to kind of measure out where you want your body to end and the dubbed head to begin. So that's why I kind of start my thread at a specific spot. And as we go through this, there are a lot of little things that you have to make sure that you pay attention to if you want certain aspects. Right now I'm using this stimulator deer hair. It's stimulator hair specifically, really just because of how straight it is. It's great hair to use. And one of the things that it allows you to do is helps prevent that flaring out of the tail. If you see a lot of the really clean, neat stimulators, a lot of those have that really, straight tail. This blue brush is pretty cool. It's actually a flea brush for dogs, and it does a nice job of getting that all that all that loose hair from inside your hair, getting that combed out. That'll just soak up moisture and just basically make your fly sink. So we're going to measure this out and make sure that that tail is just going a little bit over the back bend of the hook. I'm going to transfer that over, pinch it, and get that tied down. So you want to hold it high up off the hook, kind of up in the air like that. That'll prevent the hair from wrapping around the shank. And if we kind of, I know it gets tough as we get down, but you want to continue to hold on to that, and that's what's going to allow that hair to stay straight and not just flare out all over the place on you. And you got to be careful with your last wrap. See, I didn't really bite down hard on the last wrap. If you bite down hard on that last wrap, that's what's going to make that tail really kind of flare out. That's something you don't want to happen. So I'm going to get this snipped off as close as I can and get that wrap all the way up to the front. Now remember, we're stopping where we want the body to end. For the body material, I'm going to use this bright yellow uni floss. I've got this in pretty much every color. I tie all kinds of different colors of stimulators, and I keep using this. It's a really good material, and I get that tied in on the side, and I'll hold that tight as I go all the way down the shank, getting that locked in there. Now, one of the things you can do too, I'm not going to do it in this video, but one of the things that you can do is you can UV cure the body. That'll help prevent the absorption of water. A lot of people argue that it does add some weight to the fly, which it does. I mean, there's no arguing that. But to be honest with you, with all the deer hair and all the hackle and all that kind of stuff, it's a trivial amount of weight that you're going to add, so it should be fine. Here I'm going to tie in an extra small piece of wire. It's another little thing that people like to say adds a little bit of weight, and again, it does, but with all the stuff that's going to go on this fly, there's going to be plenty of stuff to keep it floating, so you don't have to worry too much about the wire weighing it down. So I'm going to get my thread locked in here. I'm going to use the rotary feature on my vise to get this wrapped. Obviously, if you don't have a rotary vise, you can just do this by hand, but if you can lock that in, this is one of the things that I kind of like about a rotary vise. I'm not a huge rotary vise guy, but there are a couple of things that are somewhat useful. So I'm going to get that nice and flat, and I want to hold the tail to, again, make sure that that doesn't get wrapped around. And I'm just going to work my way all the way to the front. And we should be good. I'll get that tied off. And the thread that I'm using is the 18-aught nano silk, but you can use any flat thread. Flat thread, to me, I think is really important with this fly because it lays flat and it provides you with a nice straight underbody. If you start going with like uni thread and things like that, you can build up a pretty ugly underbody, and when you wrap your floss, you're going to see all those mistakes. So I like to make sure that I use a nice flat thread, and that nano silk is some perfect stuff. This is the Hackle I'm going to use. One of the things I see with stimulators is using oversized hackle, and hackle that is way too big. You want hackle to be a little bit short of the point of the hook, so I kind of measure it out first. One of the other things that I do is I not only strip off a little bit of the barb so that I can tie it in, but I strip off the entire one side of the feather. For the body hackle, I don't tie in a complete feather. I strip off the one side of it. If you tie in the entire feather, the fly just looks so bushy. You can barely see the color of the body, which, if you want to tie a couple like that so that you can throw them in riffles and things like that, that's fine. But, if you want to actually, bring out the body color and actually be able to see it, stripping off one side of the feather, I think is a great way to do that. And you'll see when I wrap it, it's not as, it's not as bushy, it's not as dense. I think that's a much better way to do the body. So we'll get this little tag end clipped off here. And one of the things I'm doing too is I'm trying to build up a little bulk where the body ends. You want to make sure that you fill in that gap right where the body ends and the head begins as much as possible. The reason why you want to do that is when you lay your deer hair down, if you want your wing to lay flat, you don't want there to be kind of a ramp guiding it up. So I'm going to get the first wrap done here by hand. Bring that up and use my rotary feature to get that wrapped around. And if you hold the feather steady, those wraps will be nice and even. It'll look really nice going down the body. And we're going to get the wire. We're going to counter wrap that. Make sure that we can lock that in. And we'll do the same thing in the other direction. And that wire will lock that hackle right in there, and it's not going anywhere. And we'll get it down under here. And once you get into the head portion, remember, we're going to cover all that with dubbing. So, get that all tied off with as much thread as you need and make sure everything is secure and good to go. And again, that little nook right at the end of the body where the head begins, kind of where my thread is right now, you want to make sure you continuously, little by little, just build that up and build it up. And the reason why, again, is because you want your wing to lay flat. You don't want it to splay out and stick straight up in the air. You want that wing to lay nice and flat. It'll make for a much sharper looking fly, and it also obviously looks like what we're trying to imitate a little bit more, which I know a lot of people say these stimulators kind of are really stonefly imitations, which I don't know, I guess they are, but really I just view them as more of an attractor pattern. It's something big. It's a lot of calories when the fish sees it, and that's really the way I look at it. Now here's my wing. It's all stacked and evened out. I make one wrap around just the hair itself. And sometimes that's a little bit of a pain to do, but I think that just kind of holds everything in place, because what this hair can do is when you get it, I'm having a hard time getting this here. One of the things that I think it can do is by wrapping one wrap around just the hair, that kind of prevents it from rolling around your hook shank, and it'll keep your wing right up on top where you want it. And then I'll take that second wrap and put it right around the whole thing and start tightening it down. Yeah, and that one extra wrap just around just the hair, it helps lock it in so that as you make all these wraps, it's not wrapping the wing all the way around the hook shank, keeps it right on top where you can manipulate it exactly what you want. And we're going to go around and we're just going to snip off all this stuff. And right after you snip this, it's really going to look ugly. This is going to be a nasty looking head. But again, keep in mind, we're going to cover all this with dubbing. You're never going to see any of this stuff. So just get all these stray fibers out of there and make sure that, you can, they're not going to have anything sticking out. So make sure on the back end we don't have anything. I mean, those are probably good, but I'm going to snip those off so the thread can just cover it all. I got one errant fiber here wrapped around I'm trying to get my hands on. I think it's giving me I just don't want to see that when I whip finish, so I got to get rid of that. There we go. I got one more guy here kind of wrapped around. Got a gross shot of my fingers in there. I could probably use a little lotion. Now the wing right now is splaying up and out a little bit more than I would like it to, but we're going to fix that in a minute. And I'm going to show you how I do that, because a lot of times when you see stimulators tied, you see the wing kind of sticking straight up in the air and splayed out all over the place, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to avoid. So I'm going to get all this tightened down, make sure that we got a nice smooth underbody so that we can wrap our dubbing and we won't have we won't have deer hair sticking up out of it or anything. Now, see how there's a gap between the end of my thread body and the beginning of my head? That's on purpose, and I'm going to show you in a minute why I leave that gap. And I'm just going to strip off and expose a little bit of the bare barb on this, strip off a little bit of the opposite side of that feather so I can get that tied in. I always strip off a little bit of the opposite side so that first wrap gets the feather laying exactly how I want it. Let me get that tightened down. I'm going to move down the hook shank towards the body with a few more wraps, but I'm still going to leave a little bit of space before the body. I'll always leave a little space at the end of the body and in the head. And I'll show you why in a minute when we start dubbing this thing. It's a little trick to get that wing down and laying the way you want it. If you wrap your thread all the way back to the body, when your thread bites down on that deer hair, all it's going to do is crimp it and flare it up. And that's how the wing is going to stick up in the air. Here's the dubbing I'm going to use. And see how the wing is sitting right now? That's what I want to avoid. And we're going to fix that in a little bit. Now with this microfine dubbing, another mistake I see is overdubbing, which is a pretty popular thing to do. I am putting tiny little wisps on my fingers right now. I'll give you a good example. That's about how much dubbing I'm putting on every single time. So you're talking a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit. So I'm going to get all that dubbed on. I'm going to pause this while I do it. See that little gap right there? That's what I want. So as I start to wrap, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch the wing, pull it back, and get it laid down flat the way I want it. Remember, the thread will bite into the hair, but the dubbing won't. So now I'm going to close that gap, and I'm going to put a loose wrap right over the base of the wing. And see how that dubbing is going to hold that wing down? And then I'm going to go back, and I'm going to fill in and shape this the way I want. So that's a really important thing. You leave that little gap there, and then with a very, very tightly wound dubbing noodle, you just go back over, fill in that little gap, and that dubbing will hold that wing right down where we want it, and that's the look that we want. We don't want our wings sticking straight up in the air or flaring out or anything like that. That's the look that we want. And we're going to take our feather. This is a pretty simple step. Just dub it right around the head, and the thing keeps flipping on me. Come on, get over. I can't get that after the first wrap. I can't keep this thing from flipping. Come on. It's still flipping over to the other side. What the hell? You know, when I film videos, I lose a little bit of light because of the glare that you see on the fly. So you know what I bet you I did? I bet you I did this backwards because I just couldn't see. But you know what? It's not going to affect anything. I'll try one more time, see if I can get it flipped. Maybe I'll go this way a little bit. It still wants to lay that way. You know what? It's not going to make a difference. I'll just get it wrapped and we'll be fine. Probably won't even be able to notice it. So we'll go down, we'll get this wrapped with even wraps, fill in the head. All the way down. We'll leave a little space at the eye so we don't overcrowd that. Get that wrapped around and locked in. And you're going to have some stray fibers laying all over the place, especially if you had that wing turned over backwards like I just did. Like I said, I like the wing the other way. Or the feather the other way, but we'll be fine. Now, thread's white, dubbing's black. Doesn't really matter, but I like to take a Sharpie, and I'm just going to go ahead. This nano silk thread takes a color very well. So when you can get a marker on there, and you can finish with any color head that you want. So I'll get that colored black. And then when I whip finish it, I'm going to wrap the black around, and that'll give me the head that I want to finish this off. Okay, now with all these materials and everything, you're bound to have some things hanging off. You can see on the top of the wing there, I got a couple of stray deer hair fibers that kind of flared out. I got a couple of these guys around the head, so I'm gonna stroke those out, see if I can't isolate those fibers. Slip my point in there, get rid of those. A couple more, but you know, that doesn't really need to be perfect. Fish aren't going to care that much. Stroke that back, and that's exactly the way you want that to sit. So there's a lot of little things that you can do by, you know, holding the tail on the top of the shank and with the wing to make sure that your stimulator comes out to where it's not all flared out. Okay, thanks for watching.